Yes, America is a racist nation. America is a bigoted nation. America is a self-centered nation.
Absolutely. No question. America has been racist since its beginnings, and it continues to be so, unfortunately.
Wow, that's a difficult question to answer. America was built around racist ideals, and realistically, in terms of American history, that wasn't that long ago. You know, America is a young country in terms of when you look at like European nations or like the British Empire, for instance. You know, there's such history there. But is America a racist nation? It was certainly built around racist ideals, and I think that legacy still carries on to some extent today.
When I'm asked the question, is the United States a racist nation? I have to answer that question, yes.
It's undeniably true that America is a racist nation and has been since the day of its inception.
At this point in time, yes, we still are.
Yes. Yes, it is. I do believe it is.
No. I believe America is a jealous nation. I believe that most of the people, we look at each other and we see the things that we don't have, and we consider that racism. To me, what I notice is racism is a play on words.
America has a serious racial problem that is potentially a deadly cancer on the society. And so in that sense, it is a racist nation, and it basically always has been.
I think that America is a racist nation, but it has evolved from the time that I was a youngster until the time now.
Man, I'm really trying to think of a time that race has played just into the impression somebody got of me first thing. I want to say no, but I'm sure, but probably yes at some time in my life. Whether I was intuitive about that or not is kind of I guess a separate question.
Oh, absolutely. There's no way that you could be an African American teenager in this nation and have never been profiled, whether you live in the suburbs, whether you live in the inner city, whether you live in the country. I grew up in the country, and there were days where I was actually pulled over and harassed by police officers without even them knowing who I was.
I guess I would say so, yes. I was riding in Alabama with my husband when I was a very young woman, and the policeman stopped us simply because we were black, you know, and asked us why were we in that area. So we were just passing through to get to my husband's cousin's house. But he was very aggressive and nasty and disrespectful.
Yes. At birth, I was racially profiled. I was born in Tarboro, North Carolina, which is in Edgecombe County. You had two hospitals that you can go to for childbirth or for medical care. I was born in 1947, 2 years after World War II, and the hospital that I had to go to was Quigley's. It was an all-black hospital. To get to Quigley's, you had to pass by the white hospitals that was for the other people. So from birth, from the time I was born into a racial divide atmosphere at Quigley's Hospital, where the care was only given by medical doctors and staff that was African American. And many of the facilities there was not equal to those that was provided for other citizens?
Well, being white, white privilege. Being Jewish occasionally, I've had a little bit. Being Southern. When I went to school up north, my Southern accent wasn't popular.
Not as a minority, no. But I have been racially singled out and discriminated against.
Yes, of course. Because I lived in a predominantly Afro-American neighborhood. I attended segregated schools. I graduated from a predominantly black college. I taught in my early years at a predominantly black school. And it wasn't until I moved to an integrated school during my career that I was profiled. Because I came from a predominantly black school. When I moved into the integrated school, there were certain things that was expected of me in teaching the integrated classes. I was monitored by the Caucasians of the school. That the administration was predominantly Caucasian. So I was monitored because I think it was not spoken, but it was unspoken, that I wasn't as competent as the other teachers.
Yes. I was racially profiled just based on the fact of me being a black man in an area where I was not supposed to be, and I was pulled over by policemen, searched, asked questions based upon my skin color.
Yes, I have. For jobs, I have been looked over for jobs for other white females that were less experienced than I was.
Well, I think because of our history, there's always been a love-hate relationship between Caucasians and black people in this country because of our background, because of slavery, because of our connection to each other. We have worked in the white people's kitchen. We have served them. We have been, at the same time, we've nursed their children, and at the same time been the butt of their jokes and been the subject of their vilification, their hatred, the targets of their hatred. And so I think that has been so instilled in the psyche of the Caucasian American, and also in the psyche of black American, until I believe that is the issue. Many writers have written that America's issue is the black and white issue. I think it's changing.
Absolutely, I do. I feel that African Americans are disproportionately racially profiled than any other race in America. I don't know if there is, I do believe that there is a systematic conspiracy to make African Americans feel like they're still not welcome here in America. And I do feel that African Americans are held back solely based upon their skin color.
Yes, I do. It depends upon, I guess, the neighborhood that you were reared in, the schools that you attended, the family economics of your family, the economic status. People will get a different impression of you until they get to know you.
And pretty much definitively, I think black people suffer the most. What I would like to say is this. Not being a member of the minorities, I don't really know, but I would, it seems to me historically that the darker the pigment of the skin, the more bias and prejudice and hatred and intolerance that race of people will suffer.
You're going to see someone that may not look the way you want them to look, and you judge them not because of who they are, because of something that you have to do. You have judgments. You have things that you see that you don't like. You have things in you that you can't even look in the mirror and see for yourself. But you are so willing to look at everybody else and see all the nitpicking things that they need to change. Those are the things that I see. I see that the process starts inside. It's where your heart is. If you're compassionate, then you wouldn't even know the racism word, because compassion means love for all beings.
Oh, certainly. There are lots of profiles by degree, but in every subculture, there are specific profiles that cause you to go against the grain of the larger society, and because you go against the grain, as soon as the tide flows out and for whatever reason you're flowing in, whether it's something that's like race that's not a choice at all, or whether it's something that is a choice, like what you choose to believe in your faith, then you're still going against the grain and you're still going to be profiled. The smaller you are and the larger the tide that you're going against would make the difference.
I think that when the question comes up, is any one person or any one group, minority, profiled more in a racist society such as America's, I think that it's pretty safe to say that the darker the complexion of your skin, the more likely you are to be profiled. Now, historically, we have to understand that the American Indians, for instance, have suffered, a great injustice. Christopher Columbus was a liar, a pirate, a swindler, a slaver, the architect of a system of genocide that killed from 25 to 50 million people.
Yes, I think today black is overwhelmingly feared and vilified. So, yeah, they get more than most.
Yeah, profiles can be used two different ways. I believe that one group is profiled more than others. Whites are profiled up and blacks are profiled down. Latinos are beginning to join in that process. It is the Europeans in America that is being profiled in a positive way, and African Americans, Latinos, and others that come into this country that's not that color, they're profiled in a negative way. And these things are not right. It's not what should be taking place in this country or any place. We're born equal in the eyes of God. We're His children. We're here in His likeness, and everybody claimed the tenets. African Americans were introduced to Christianity by Europeans, and the same Europeans that introduced us to Christianity have taken the cross for them and given us the belt, the lash.
Yes. I don't know if the law is still in place in New York City, but it was called Stop, Question, and Frisk. Literally, if the police officer felt that they had what they would call reasonable suspicion, or sometimes not even reasonable suspicion, they would walk up to someone on the street and they would question them, and then they would frisk them to see if they had anything on them. The thing that made this unjust is that on more than 75% of the time, it was African American males that were actually being stopped, questioned, and frisked.
Absolutely. And I think it's so ignorant to not acknowledge that. And people like to pretend that that everything is okay, race relation wise, you know. I don't believe that.
People are creatures of habit, and people do what oftentimes is comfortable. People don't like confrontation, and people will oftentimes take the path of least resistance. So to avoid major incidents, people will oftentimes spend more time with people that look like them and think like them than spending time with other races.
No, I think that's something very different. You know, affinity groups are things that will last and live forever, but racism is an institutional thing, and oppression is very real, and oppression and racism have a relationship to each other. And I think America is definitely racist.
America is racist. Racism has tenets that set it apart from a person or people who are actually in your community and just look at you a certain way. Racism victimize the humankind, and they evict ugly and harsh pain, punishment, injustice, imprisonment, take away financial rewards and financial capabilities, and when one move up on his own accord within the tenets of the Constitution of the United States, and they're born black or born brown or born different, then they're subject to the racism and the backlash of a group. Their property can be taken from them, which took place in Forsyth County, it took place in all parts of Georgia, it took place in North Carolina, it took place in every southern state, and the northern states are not much better, and Midwest have got their problems too. America as a whole is a very racist nation, and the people of America that should have rights do not have those rights, and there's no reason for anyone to pretend that it's just a group of people. It can be better, it's gonna be better. A degree, a college degree do not change that. Your position in society do not change because of money. Your color follow you forever, wherever you go. It's a tracking system that America use, and you cannot hide from that.
I think there's some systemic racism involved. A lot of it is economic these days, but the fear the mass media plays on it, and it's in our schools. Our schools are now more segregated than they were years ago, and that separation is there.
Saying America is racist is using a broad brush, because America is so diverse. And yes, people do gravitate towards what they connect with. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. In fact, I think we need to emotionally mature and understand what a tribe is, and what makes a tribe, and why having a tribe is important.
But do people gravitate towards like people of their own race or ethnicity or like identity? I think to some extent, yes. I think like culturally especially, right? Like we were talking about music before this. Just in terms of music, what do we listen to in America? We listen to American and European music, you know? Do a lot of people in America listen to like Brazilian music? No? Does that mean that those cultures can't like coexist or something like that? No, of course not.
That we have tried to assimilate and tried to be, meshed together in our melting pots, but we still, in schools, in churches, in organizations, we also understand that there's always a kind of gravitational toward a safe place. And so you have a lot of that still today, but even though you have situations where there is more homogeneous kinds of situations.
White privilege is when a privilege that white people have over pretty much in every area I can think of, as far as jobs, finances, when it comes to money. It is a privilege that they have because of the color of their skin. They are given the benefit of the doubt before anything. Black people are guilty until they are proven innocent.
If you're white, you're right. So I believe that white America come together as a group of people to systematically deny African Americans and Hispanic and Latino Americans from attaining the American dream. White privilege is, yes, they get the loans to start businesses. Yes, they get the mortgages. Yes, even if they file bankruptcy, after their bankruptcy is discharged, they're like starting over from scratch. So a bankruptcy on their record is not looked at with the same equality as if African American have a bankruptcy on their credit report.
Oh man, what is white privilege? White privilege is, I mean, this is what the country is built on, right? There's there's a very clear gap between black people and white people, and that has been for a long time. White privilege is that gap. White privilege is education, information, just accessibility to school, accessibility to food, just basic things that everybody should have. But I don't know, there's a huge privilege. I am a product of white privilege. I realize this, I grew up around Atlanta, and I don't know, that difference, that advantage statistically that I had was clear to me. Of course there's white privilege. And that sucks. That's a shame. That's an awful shame in the country, but there is, and it would be foolish to say that there's not.
White privilege is what is seen as the advantages of one particular group over another. Even breaking it down and looking at how we're categorized, white, if you look it up in the dictionary, will be pure, clean. And if you looked black, it would be the absence of light, the absence of color, darkness, something that's dirty. So even based upon how we quantify ourselves as saying white or black, just that designation alone shows supremacy, that white or light is superior to darkness.
White privilege is the things that people have simply because of their skin color. They have certain benefits, and that's why we tried to have laws that would make it possible for people of color to have more opportunity. But unfortunately, they said that was discriminatory. So there's been a dismantling of those kinds of actions, unfortunately. Affirmative action, in fact, it's called.
The assumption that white is the dominant and correct way to do things. If get a pile of applications for a job or for a housing, if you're white, that goes to the top of the pile. If it's black, very questionable unless there's something that stands out. And if you got a stack of 100 job applications, probably aren't going to get far enough down the stack to get to the black applicants.
White privilege is the momentum that is created in a society where, as a white person, you're not connected to anybody who's not like you. The boundaries of your understanding of other cultures have been so far removed that you don't bump into those boundaries and never really think of those boundaries. So you operate in a culture. I grew up in white privilege. I grew up a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, a WASP. I grew up around everybody like me. It was a very odd and strange thing for a different person, and it was exotic and unaccommodating when somebody came in who was so different, and the whole system had to begin to change. And so that momentum that's created by an overwhelming group of people, in this case white people, has a hard time being turned to understand other people.
They can. I believe people of color can be racist depending on where they live and how they live. You know what I'm saying? It just depends on the individual, on how they lived, and where they're from.
Yes, certainly they can. Again, it comes from what you're taught. If Jerome is taught that he's not supposed to play with little Susie or little Mary because she is of a different race, then that's what they will do. But if they're not taught, and you just let them socialize with each other, then they won't be racist.
No, I don't think people of color can be racist. I did some research a while back, and I do know for a fact that being racist is not just a dislike because of a person's skin color, but it is the power to stop them from advancing, the power to stop a race of people from getting a mortgage. It is the power of stopping a race of people from getting that promotion on the job. It is the power to stop any type of advancement of a particular race or culture.
Yes, people of color are racist too.
Well, I have talked about this discussion, I had this discussion before. At one time, people were saying, well, a person of color can't be racist because racism is an institution which can, by itself, by its very nature, suppress other individuals. So they would say a person of color can't be racist, but a person of color can be prejudiced. Now, I think if we look at history, however, we can see that people of color, as well as other people, can be racist. Racism would be any kind of negative feeling toward someone else that says that this person is inferior to me. And so there are black people who could actually feel that others are inferior to them as well. And so a person of color could also be racist, yes.
Yeah, anybody can be racist. Absolutely. Yeah, that goes without saying. I mean, it comes down again to individuals. Individuals are individuals. Some people are racist.
I don't think so. I think people misunderstand what racism is. People of color can discriminate, but that's not the same thing as racism. Racism is something that has to do with power. And people of color don't have the kind of influence, generally speaking, that would make their discrimination impact the society in the same way that the institutionalized racism that we experience today does.
Yes, they tend to congregate among themselves.
Yes. The black people would not really allow me to eat with them. They wanted to, they sort of excluded me from things.
Yeah, the traditional academic and progressive definition of racism is that racism is the feeling of superiority and the ability to enforce it. And in that sense, then, the minorities who are victims of racism cannot be racist because they don't have the ability to enforce their dislike or hatred for the majority. And so that traditionally, in progressive circles, black people cannot be racist, even though they dislike and hate.
Reverse racism is just a very poor argument that says, you're the problem, not me. And that doesn't work in real relationships.
Reverse racism is when you're dealing with a situation where, in my opinion, where a person that is racist simply because they feel that people are racist toward them. So it is basically a mindset of hate. I hate you because you hate me.
Reverse racism. I mean, it doesn't just have to be a black or white thing. I guess that's what I'm getting back to. Any group passing judgment on any group could be kind of a reverse racism. Now, are the origins the same? Like the reason for reverse racism, is that the same as the reason for racism? I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think that that could just be a product of that oppression, a product of, the environment or anything like that.
There's no reverse racism. If you're using a word to define racism, then you're telling yourself and telling everyone that racism is there. If you use another word to define it, then you've already moved it to being something else.
I guess people think of that as people of color being racist. Is that what reverse racism would be? And perhaps it's what was able to dismantle affirmative action, the idea that people of color might actually have some favor. But in that's not reverse racism, because the sheer numbers of people who are, for want of a better word, white, their sheer numbers dispels that reality.
Reverse racism to me is pretty much just racism. I don't understand the difference between reversing it and the regular way. Either you're going to judge someone based off of their skin color, or you're not. That's the only way. The reverse of it is what? I don't get it.
When someone of a minority rejects someone in the majority or treats them badly.
Slavery, I think now, is a state of mind. At one time it was physical. Now I believe that it is a state of mind. If you feel that you cannot do because of your race or because of your color or because of your economic status, then you won't do. But if you have in your mind that you can do, and you take off the chains of slavery off of your mind, then you can do.
Slavery is pretty much getting someone to do hard labor at no wages.
My definition of slavery. Well, I think slavery was an institution that physically, socially, psychologically, and emotionally scarred the lives of a race of people who were considered to be inferior to another race of people. And slavery, even though at one time it was a shackled, physical shackle kind of situation, and it moved away from the physical shackles, and there was emancipation from the physical shackles of racism. Still, the social and the psychological shackles of racism remain. And they are so endemic in our society. They have become almost a genetic code in the lives of the inhabitants of Americans, because still today, black people still feel some of that genetic pull. They've heard through the stories of their parents and through their own feelings in situations where they thought that they were doing okay, and they were in heterogeneous situations where they were in schools and they're going to school with the black and white going together, but at a certain point they knew that there was always a dividing point. There was always a cutoff point for them to move. And so I think that's one of the reasons that this particular thing takes place.
Oh, my definition of slavery is you don't have the choice that you want. You don't have the choice that you need to express who you are. Somebody else is making your choices. And I've got a little bit of a soapbox when it comes to that. And the reason is because I think because there was such an enlightenment in the 60s and 70s, and everybody so wanted the world to come together, that we've created some momentum for a utopian one world. Imagine there's no nations. Imagine and I understand that, and I'm all about that. Let's imagine beyond where we are. But if we imagine that we're going to have a one world government and a one utopian unicountry, then we're fooling ourselves, because the more consolidated people groups get, the more one person makes everybody's choices. And in America, we've gone back and forth with that. We've got two very different opposing sides when it comes to that. And as it consolidates more and more, we realize, hey, my guy might be or might not be on top. And there's a very real fear that my guy doesn't win the day. Because if my guy doesn't win the day, then the person that's making choices for me doesn't represent me. And that's scary. And so I think a much better idea is tribalism, where we begin to recognize people are different, but they're different in a way that we can honor them and that we can celebrate their difference rather than separate from their difference. It's an integrated diversity that celebrates and works together so that I can speak for what I feel. And I don't have to be integrated into the conglomerate that speaks for me. And I'm like the whole time going, wait, oh, no, that's not quite right. No, that's not quite me. Because right now, nobody's speaking for what I feel is really me, you know?
My definition of slavery is, it doesn't have to be just looked upon black people. I think anybody can be a slave. We know it as slavery because of our ancestors and how they were treated. And you know, my grandmother, she passed away when she was 98. She used to tell us stories that she used to pick cotton, and then she would pick cotton so long where her hands would bleed, and they would make her stop because they didn't want blood on the cotton. So they, you know, got her hands together, and then after she said, and I said, Grandma, she said, the same day, baby. She said, they give me a couple hours and heal them up, and I'll be back out there.
I just really couldn't say. It's so very difficult to see what that might look like, because you have to ask yourself, the Native Americans, how further along are they? And they've never been officially enslaved. And then you look at other groups here who have not really advanced, even though they weren't slaves. So I just don't know if that would make a difference. Just like when President Barack Obama became president, we were just all so very, very hopeful that now, right now, things would change, things would be different, because it certainly was not just black people who elected him. But unfortunately, this racist system has demonstrated that it really doesn't matter who is the head of state, because the state itself, in its very fabric, is racist.
Farther ahead, certainly, than had they come on their own accord. Would it be equal, I guess, is truly equal? You know, would we live in like a raceless society? It's hard to say. It's hard to speculate about that question, because it's so hard to see it not in the context of the history that we have lived. Like when I learned about the Civil War when I was in elementary school, it was states' rights. The Civil War wasn't about slavery, it was about states' rights. That's not true. I mean, okay, states' rights, yes, but slavery was such a big part of those states' rights, you know. I don't know. That's such a complex question. I guess the only answer I can say is further ahead, way significantly further ahead. This would be a totally different country and racial landscape.
Black people did come to America as citizens. They came to America as citizens, as working citizens. That is my definition of it. They came as working citizens. They planted their roots here, whether white people liked it or not. The moment black people put their feet on this land, their energy was here just as well as theirs was. We set our terms here just as well as they did. Just because black people did more things in secret and in privacy does not mean that they were not citizens. It's the same way we look at Asian Americans and Latino Americans. We're still looking at them as minority citizens. They are not minorities. They are citizens. Just like we were citizens when we were brought here. The moment you put your feet somewhere, you a citizen.
The education system of Europe reached out to Africans that crossed the continents hundreds of years ago, and many of us got educated in the schools of France and the schools of England and Spain long before we went into the shackles. So it's just a difficult thing to say that we would not have racism if we had not been in shackle, that our lives would have been different if we were still in Africa. The things that, the climate, the diseases, and the lack of growth in technology, all those things would have played a part in our development. In one sense, when you look at the educational side, you would say that you will argue, some have argued that we are better because of that. When you put a rope on a man's neck, and put whip lashes on his back, it does not matter how much he can add and multiply and subtract, divide, use logarithms or higher forms of mathematics, or be able to spell and read words. He is still indentured, and nothing erased that quality.
Quite a bit. The labor, 1850, probably 40–50% of the wealth of what was then the United States was in southern agricultural enterprises. Now, not all of it in the South. Many New York and Boston landowners or bankers owned plantations in the South. They didn't live on the farm, but they owned it, and they got the profits from those enterprises. And that was the wealth of the United States in 1850. It was produced by black labor. The United States Capitol was built by slave labor.
I think many have come to America as citizens. How far would the Indians be had they integrated into society rather than giving their lives for what they believe? Well, you know what? There were many that integrated rather than gave their lives. That is a hard, hard question that I don't think can be answered accurately, because history is history. Now, I think the real question is, has there been serious damage done to a certain part of the African American subculture because of the pain, because of the inequity, because of what was done? Absolutely. And what is the answer for that? Well, the answer is to go back and make retribution. I mean, I am a spiritual person, but not necessarily a religious person, but I know the text, and the text of the Bible even says you need to go back and make retribution for the sins of your fathers. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason, because the reason is this: if I was in that same position and I was having to make the same decisions, I probably would make the same decisions. And even though this is far removed and I'm a different person and this is a different age, we're still people. And I would have made the same decisions my fathers made. So here I am. So is it right for me to go back and say, I'm sorry, please forgive us? It can't be washed, just water under the bridge. No, it has to be accounted for. It has to be taken care of. So that's the real question, is what do we do about the people who have been hurt? What do we do about the fallout, the generational fallout from that? Well, we go back and we make it right, and we listen. That's one of the things I'm trying to do, is create platforms for people to be able to listen, because you can't make it right if you don't listen.
Slavery was a terrible institution that just kept them in substandard conditions from the beginning. On the other hand, there is, it just seems like there's an inherent racism against dark-skinned people, and it's just a thing that is just, it's just bizarre. It's just really strange to me, and it's Alice in Wonderland.
If we had not come here as slaves, we would have had a black president before we had a black president. We would have had more black legislators. We would have more black congressmen than we have in Washington. We would have more black mayors. We would have more black citizen people who are leading the community, and we would not have as many poverty-stricken areas that we have today. We would not have as many single-parent homes that we have today, because it is principally because we don't have the economics to keep our families together. So we have more broken families, more broken homes, and children who are being reared by a single parent.
Oh, wow. It's hard to answer that question, because I try to be really candid and also look at life for what it is. On the one hand, I would like to say, if black people had been given the same economic privilege, social privilege, and mobility as white people, then we would have totally far exceeded, we probably would have taken over the country. And you say that because, as you see, because of the years of suppression that black that even in the midst of all those years of suppression, that black people have still emerged as leaders in almost every single field, not just in sports, but in politics, in many, many areas. I think our last frontier has been the economic area because we were not taught economics coming up. So I think, and from one standpoint, I would say that black people would have far exceeded where they are today and far exceeded white people. On the same, with the same argument, which is a little bit different, people tend to emerge, they rise through struggle. Many times, racism became a challenge. The obstacles of our lives becomes the stepping stones for us to rise. And sometimes when people are oppressed, sometimes the more you oppress them, when the glimmer of light, the glimmer of hope comes toward them, then they move with rapid force and emerge as a glorious people. And I really believe that many of the hurdles, the stepping, the mountains and the valleys that we had, mountains to come over and the valleys to walk through, have helped us also to move ahead. And I think that if we can let go, if our society can let go of those things that will still continue to hold us back, if we can just keep on moving ahead, we'll do fine.